Okay, thank you all for being here. I want to talk about layout paragraphs for Backdrop, which is a new thing that's in development. So what I'm about to show you has some rough edges, but I think it's really interesting when you have projects that like between Drupal and Backdrop that have such a shared history and shared concepts that are both trying to answer the same questions, but as they diverge, they begin to answer them differently. And so I want to go through, as I've been developing layout paragraphs, how it's being tied more tightly to Backdrop and answering it a little bit differently than the way Drupal answered it. And I'm guessing we'll have time at the end for any questions or comments or whatever you'd like to bring. So feel free to take notes on those things as well. All right, my name is Laren Kropbaker. I'm a developer with Atten Design Group, and I kind of specialize in Backdrop. Atten does strategy, design, development for mission-driven organizations, and obviously is well known in the Drupal community. Also does some WordPress work and Backdrop work. As mentioned, strategy, design, development for mission-driven organizations like these. Proud to do work that matters. So my slides are a little dry, I know, but I'm going to be breaking out of the slides periodically to show some live demonstrations with my local. So don't let the wall of text scare you when I flip between slides. So one of the reasons for Backdrop's fork originally was backwards compatibility and affordability. So knowing that there were groups that couldn't make the leap from Drupal 7 to modern Drupal, knowing that the composer-driven dependency stack would incur too much of a maintenance burden for certain types of groups, organizations, companies. Backdrop forked and began to move in a different direction with a different focus. So less of a focus on enterprise and bigger projects, bigger budgets, and more of a focus on affordability and backwards compatibility. So at the time that the code diverged, obviously it was identical. And as these two projects have had their different focuses over time, it's been a decade now. The answers to the questions change. So I'm going to focus mainly on Backdrop today, but I have just a few short slides with describing how Drupal answered it so that I can counterpoint or contrast how I'm doing it in Backdrop. And so if any of you were around at the presentation I did last year at Stanford WebCamp on Gin, the answers that we end up with don't always look completely different, especially on the surface. Like the end result of bringing Gin to Backdrop was that the admin theme looks substantially similar between the two, even though underneath things are running a little bit differently in some places. And obviously a theme is a place where the end look of things is kind of what the end result is, the purpose is. In this case, I want to talk a little bit about some of the underpinnings of the layout paragraphs, which looks quite different than the way it works in Drupal. So over the years, paragraphs in Backdrop have had some minor improvements that make life more simple. I don't know how many of you have used or do currently use or are familiar with the Drupal 7 version of paragraphs. And Backdrop takes that and has made some stepwise improvements to make things easier. So there's a status flag, so you can enable or disable a paragraph. You don't have to delete it and then recreate it later. You can unpublish it, fix it up, publish it again later when you're ready for it. Some simple front-end editing capabilities. So if any of you are familiar with that vertical stack of paragraphs, if you're looking on the front end of your website and you see like, oh, one of these paragraphs has a typo, I need to fix that, then you've got to go into the back end and scroll down and try to find it in this big list of paragraphs and click edit. And it's so many steps to get to it. So there's a relatively simple way to do that in Backdrop now from the front end and make a quick fix without having to go through all of those steps. And I'll show you some of these in just a minute, just so you're familiar with the landscape. of backdrop and paragraphs. And then moving the action links around in the back end. So instead of each paragraph having a whole bunch of big buttons or things like that, it moves it into a simpler drop-down format. So let me know if my screen's following where I'm going here. Does it work? I break out of the slideshow?
Yep.
Okay. So this is just on my local, and you can see this is just a paragraph that in the back end, this is the sort of legacy or standard embedded paragraphs display. And so you have this vertical list that you can, sort up and down only, so you can only sort vertically. And then the action buttons kind of moved off to the side here, the ability to unpublish or republish if it was unpublished. And then on the front end, you can see like there's some kind of simple little editing tools here for a simple little typo or fix like this. You can kind of do it without having to scroll back to the back end for that. So there's some simple little improvements along the way. And then one thing that's been percolating in the background is the question of what if we don't want to just be, stuck in this vertical sort capability, and we want to be able to have different regions. And then you can get into, different strategies over the last years that have been like nesting paragraphs and stuff like that. So you have, one paragraph that contains other paragraphs, and then you can, break them into columns in that way. And it kind of works, but it's kind of clunky, and it's not really the best way to handle it. So recent developments, as I mentioned, this question has been open for years. Layout paragraphs has existed for Drupal for years. And I've been sort of planning and working and thinking about this in small amounts of free time that I have as I can. Recently, we've gotten a little bit of funding from the University of Colorado, Denver College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So I wanted to first acknowledge that, thank them publicly, because being able to work on this in chunks that are measured by hours instead of minutes has been really helpful. And as I mentioned at the outset, it's in kind of what I would still consider an early stage, hoping to spur some community involvement, some other organizations that are inspired and want to help chip in and either with pull requests or testing and issues or funding, any way that is possible to help move this forward faster would be awesome. I think we're at a place where you can kind of see where it's going, and hopefully that can help inspire. Okay, so the question that we're addressing is how to make paragraphs more flexible and friendly, especially when we're talking about moving things around in kind of a layout format or in different regions of the page. So it's been nearly 5 years ago, my colleagues at Atten began developing layout paragraphs for Drupal. And this is kind of the mission statement they provided, which was to make it intuitive, drag and drop, build flexible layouts, and also to make it work with existing paragraph reference fields. So rather than create something completely new that doesn't work with anything else, and you have to sort of completely rebuild, migrate all your content, that kind of thing, something that is kind of a slip in that people who already have sites or people who, inherited sites, that kind of thing, could still use the new functionality without rebuilding things completely. So one of the clever method for achieving this that they built was the idea of creating a new type of paragraph for a section of the layout. So you can create a section paragraph and define what that means and where you can place other paragraphs within it. So you can kind of, in this way, build the layout that you're working with section by section as you go, and then place your paragraphs within that. And this is the visual that's on the project page on Drupal.org for layout paragraphs. You can see the vertical stack that we looked at earlier, and the goal of moving to something where you have different regions that you can drag around in that may involve different regions, different columns, that kind of thing. So what about layout paragraphs for Backdrop? So initially looking at layout paragraphs for Drupal, thinking how can I bring this over? Because sometimes it is possible to just take something, even if it was built for modern Drupal, and move it over in one, with a variety of with work, as I did with Gin, as other modules have been brought over. But in the end, there was one major consideration that made me think it would probably be better not to just try to copy it wholesale from the Drupal version, which is that Backdrop has its own layout system, and it's completely different than what's available in modern Drupal. So Backdrop's layout system separates what Drupal thinks of as a theme, and it breaks it into two pieces. So you have the theme, which controls in the perfect world, it's just the colors and the fonts and the styling. And then you have the layout, which is the regions of the page and the structure in that way. And then Backdrop also introduced some way down the pipe after the layout system, an expansion of that, which was called flexible layouts, meaning that the layout templates could now be created and edited directly in the user interface. It didn't have to be provided in code. But the problem is that the layout system in Backdrop only works currently for full page layouts in the site, where you're placing all your blocks around the page, and then you have your main content section. But the layout controls the entire page, not just the section of the page. And I'm going to jump here real quick and show you. This is the layout system as it's provided in Backdrop. So this is the default layout. You can see you've got a header, different regions, you've got a footer, and then you can configure it. Whoops, I gotta turn off my Xdebug. Okay, so you can configure it and choose any of these different templates that are provided out of the box, or use one of these flexible layouts. So if I go to layout templates, and you can see you now have the ability to create a brand new template directly in the user interface. So you have your header and your footer by default, your main content area, but then you can add other rows, and you can define number of regions and kind of the default percentages of width that those would entail. So this is the system. This type of interface, I didn't want to have to rebuild from scratch, and I also wanted to have unity with the system, so that the different elements, the different modules and so on, all have kind of a unity about them. So the first step in answering this was then an API expansion for Backdrop's layout system, and have a pull request in to Backdrop core that will allow you to specify a layout type. And so the theory being then that I could create a new layout template that's specifically for paragraphs. And then it doesn't, muddy up the core layout templates. So you're not seeing, layout paragraphs templates within the main page template listings and so on. And then also whether it's a full page layout. So in the case of paragraph layouts, we're not going to want to have a header and a footer. We're not going to want to display the page title and things like that are automatically handled by the core layout system. And then besides the consistency and the administrative experience, we'd also have less of a maintenance burden in Contrib if we're not maintaining our own completely different layout system. So, and once the API is expanded, the other existing contributed modules, such as mini layouts or layout nodes, could then be adapted to use this new expansion of the API and have a cleaner result. But not only Contrib, there's also some discussion about potentially using this layout system more broadly, even in core. And one example, if you're familiar with Drupal or Backdrop's manage field screens on an entity, like on a node, for example, think about being able to structure the the fields that you get when you're creating your node into a layout, and be able to say, I want to have the image field, and I want them to have that off in kind of a sidebar here, and when they're creating the page and that kind of thing. So being able to use this expansion of the layout system even in core. So it's a feature that I think will be useful in a whole bunch of different ways. And this is just a screenshot to illustrate what I was just talking about how right now, again, you have that sort of vertical up and down thing for fields, but if we had this in a layout, you could place your fields in ways that make more sense for content editors. So with that core piece in place, we can now move on to some new capabilities for paragraphs. And as I mentioned, there's a few rough edges here, so hopefully some grace if there are any rough edges. I have some particular things I want to show that I think are pretty good in a pretty good state. And if anybody's inspired, please jump in and join in. So the first thing that I did, which is different from the Drupal version, is that what I wanted to do was to using that interface we looked at, allow the ability to create paragraph layout templates just separately as a separate process. So you have create kind of a library of available layout templates that are for use with paragraphs. And then place that interface underneath the paragraphs menu where you'd expect to find it. When you first install layout paragraphs, provide a default layout that's only one row and one column, which is the functional equivalent of what you get with your embedded paragraphs. You can only sort vertically in that scenario. So makes it easy. If you remember back at the earlier slide where we talked about, we want to make it easy for people who have paragraph fields already and would like to move to using layouts to be able to do this simply. And by default, just turning it on then would provide a functional equivalent, and then they can choose other layout templates and move the paragraphs around and so on. But just by turning it on, it's sort of a one-to-one equivalent. And then, once you have that library of possible or approved layout templates, they can be used within the field. So in this example here, you can see there's the default, one row, one column, and then I just created a few examples of other layouts here for use. And the reason the icons were showing up a little bit funny on the core page actually was because I'm as part of my core PR, I'm trying to change this to not be a raster image, but to be a SVG that's generated on the fly. So if if I were to go here and add a row, just another full row underneath this, and then save that template and go back here, you can see the little icon just generates and updates on the fly to kind of keep pace with whatever you've changed in the UI. So so here we're creating this library of templates that we can use. And then next step was to create a new field widget for the layout UI to allow people to select this widget for use. So you have some templates in your library. Now we have a field widget that you can choose. As I mentioned, the default one-to-one, one row, one column is a functional replacement for embedded paragraphs, if you want to do it that way. And then the ability to select for a particular, for each particular paragraphs field gives you the choice of which of those layout templates from your library are available, in the same way that you can select which paragraph types are allowed in a field. So if I go to, let's say, components, first of all, if I go to manage fields, you'll see the widget shows up as a layout UI. And then this is pre-existing, but you can kind of pre-select which paragraph types are allowed in this field. So in this case, I've only selected 2 of the 3. And then the new piece of this widget is that it also allows you to select which of those templates from the library are you allowed to use in this field. And so uh, um, my thinking behind that is that you may have a content type called landing page, and you may have a very particular way that you want your landing pages to be displayed. You don't want to give a complete wide open, any kind of layout you want, just go hog wild. It's like this is the template for landing pages, and these are the regions you have to work with. In that case, you can select just the layout template that you want to make available. But in other cases, you may want to make 2 or 3 or whatever number of templates available for flexibility. And in that case, you can select multiples. And then if you have selected multiples, the ability to switch between those layouts is obviously key. So, and then once you've changed the layout, the paragraphs are going to have to try to reflow based on what the template you've created. So at this point, I'm going to leave the slides because that's as far as I got, but I have a few more things to tell you. So here's an example, and the colors here are not the way it will be in the end. They're sort of just, I was testing recoloring with the SVG icons to make sure it was working. And I just used something quick and easy, but it's not the final UI we'll have for that. So by default, this basic page example, we saw how I had configured that field to allow, 2 different layout templates. So here they are showing up. The default one is the one that's selected currently, but if I clicked on this one and changed, then you can see, oh, that simple sidebar template is picked, and we can move the paragraphs around within here. And you can also see, oh, sorry, that one, it's one of the rough edges I was just working on right before I jumped on the call. So in this field, I also have restricted it to only allow a few different of the paragraph types. So when you pop up the paragraph window to add those, it'll only give you those 2 as options. On the other hand, I've created a demo of a landing page content type here. And when you're editing this page, you don't have the option to switch the layout, because this one is the example I was telling you about where it kind of locks you in. This is the only template you're allowed to use on a landing page, but you can move the paragraphs around within this type of template. And sort of a second phase, more long-term possibility that I'd like to get to once this is all polished up and released is that if I'll say convert this to a custom template, and then let if you've switched it over to this one, and then you click convert it to custom, it'll also give you the option to kind of build the template right within the page here. So you can do that sort of one-off, build it as you go for permissioned users. So you may not want to open that up to all content editors or site editors. But some people may maybe have sufficient permission to do that. Let me think if there's anything else that I should show before I open it up, if anybody's got questions. Oh, I should, yeah. So this whole interface here is also building off of core functionality for editing blocks in the regular layouts. And one of the things that I think is pretty cool is so you get the paragraph editor preview display mode showing here on these blocks. But if you have something you want to control more manually, you can say like this is a custom description. Then you can kind of override it. So the admin display only can be customized, and you can, if you want to write notes to yourself about how this is used or what it's intended for, that kind of thing, it's an option there. And then this also does open up some future possibilities, because the core modal also includes the ability to control different types of things related to styles. So for the first phase, I want to, for the most part, have it be, you can turn it on, turn it off, and not really lose much except for the layout itself. But the more I get into this, the more I'm thinking there's also places where it can really be extended and give you a lot more value if you're using the layout paragraphs. So we could have a styles drop down here that lets you choose your, background color, or, those kind of things. And I've got to flesh that out in the second phase after this first phase is done. So yeah, I don't know if anybody, here's the how to add a component or add a paragraph example. This word component is just pulled from the field settings, the configuration of this field. You can name what you want to call these. They don't have to be called paragraphs. In this case, I just, as an example, called it a component. And then whatever number of these you've enabled as a type here, you have the ability to do like a search. So if you have a list of 12 of them, you don't have to pick through 12 icons. You don't have to pick through, you can sort of begin to filter it by keyword, and that searches through the title and the description. So you can probably see value in that, especially for sites that have a lot of different types of paragraphs or components. So I'm excited. I think it's really cool, and it's coming together really nicely. Obviously, we've got some work to go before a full release of this first phase. We've got some ideas for second phase, third phase, whatever. But I'm excited to hear people's thoughts, reactions, whether it's now or later in the issue queues. Feel free to get in touch, and feel free to ask questions now or add them in the issue queue or in the Backdrop chat on Zulip. I'm available and interested. So
thank you so much, Laren. I'm gonna